The moment Abigail stepped off that stagecoach in Cheyenne, she knew she'd made the worst mistake of her life. The rancher waiting at the platform wasn't expecting her. He was expecting her prettier, younger sister. The sister who'd run off 3 days before the wedding. Now Abigail stood there with dust on her face and lies in her luggage, about to tell a complete stranger that everything he'd been promised was a fraud. But before we see how this disaster unfolds, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I tell stories about survival, love, and second chances on the frontier. Stay with me until the end. This one gets wild. And please, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Hit that like button and let's get started. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under the door like a death notice. Abigail found it while scrubbing the kitchen floor of their Boston tenement, her knees aching against the warped boards. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive, completely out of place in their shabby apartment, where even the wallpaper peeled from shame. She didn't open it right away. She knew what it said. Her younger sister Margaret had been corresponding with a Wyoming rancher for 6 months. A marriage arrangement. Margaret would travel west, marry the man, and send money home to their struggling family. Their father's gambling debts had buried them so deep that even the landlord had stopped pretending he'd wait much longer for rent. Margaret was their last hope. Their only hope. Abigail set the envelope on the crooked table and went back to scrubbing. The water in her bucket had gone gray an hour ago, but she couldn't afford to waste it. She pushed the rag across the same floorboards she'd cleaned yesterday and the day before, trying to make dirt disappear through sheer stubbornness. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. "Margaret?" Abigail called. No answer. She stood, her knees cracking, and walked to the tiny bedroom they shared. The door hung open. Margaret's bed was made, unusual for her sister, who typically left sheets tangled like a bird's nest. The small trunk where Margaret kept her clothes sat empty, its lid thrown back. Abigail's stomach dropped. She moved to the corner where Margaret kept her hat box. Gone. The good shoes their mother had saved for. Gone. The silver hairbrush that had belonged to their grandmother. Gone. "No," Abigail whispered. "No, no, no." She tore through the room like a woman possessed, checking every corner, every hiding place. But she already knew. Margaret had run, packed her belongings in the dead of night, and vanished like morning fog. Abigail returned to the kitchen and finally opened the envelope with shaking hands. The letter was addressed to Margaret, but the handwriting was unfamiliar. Angular, masculine, careful. Nathaniel Cross, the rancher. He was confirming Margaret's arrival date, expressing his eagerness to meet her, describing the ranch he'd built with his own hands over 15 years of brutal frontier work. "I hope you'll find happiness here," he'd written. "I know I'm not much to look at, and the ranch is isolated, but I promise you'll want for nothing. I'll spend my life making sure you're cared for." Abigail read the letter 3 times, each pass making her feel sicker. Margaret had abandoned them. Abandoned everything. And now Abigail stood in a falling-apart apartment with an eviction notice due in 2 weeks, holding a letter meant for a woman who'd decided her own freedom mattered more than her family's survival. The door crashed open. Her father stumbled in, reeking of whiskey and failure. "Where's Margaret?" he slurred. "She needs to pack. Stagecoach leaves in 4 days." Abigail looked at him, this man who'd gambled away her mother's inheritance, who'd never held a job longer than 3 months, who'd pinned all his hopes on selling his youngest daughter to a stranger 1,500 miles away. "She's gone," Abigail said quietly. Her father's face went slack. "What?" "Margaret left, probably last night, took everything she owned." He staggered forward, gripping the table. "No, she wouldn't. She knows what's at stake. She knows exactly what's at stake," Abigail interrupted. "And she decided she didn't care." Her father's face cycled through shock, rage, then something worse, defeat. He collapsed into a chair, suddenly looking 20 years older. "We're ruined," he mumbled. "The landlord, the creditors, we're finished." Abigail stood there, watching him fall apart, and felt something cold settle in her chest. She'd spent 26 years making herself invisible. The plain sister. The practical one. The daughter who cleaned and cooked and managed the household accounts with pennies, while Margaret floated through life like a dandelion seed, pretty and careless. She looked at the letter in her hand, at the careful handwriting of a lonely man who had no idea he'd been lied to. "I'll go," she heard herself say. Her father's head snapped up. "What?" "I'll go to Wyoming. I'll take Margaret's place." "Abigail, you can't." "Why not?" She kept her voice level, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "The rancher doesn't know what Margaret looks like. He's never seen a photograph. I'll get on that stagecoach, I'll travel west, and I'll tell him the truth when I arrive." "The truth?" Her father laughed bitterly. "You think he'll accept that? You think he'll just shrug and marry you instead?" "I don't know what he'll do," Abigail admitted, "but if I don't try, we lose everything. The apartment, the furniture, whatever dignity we have left." Her father stared at her with something like pity. "Abigail, you're not... Margaret is..." "Prettier?" Abigail finished. "I know, I've known my entire life, but pretty doesn't fix fences or cook meals or run a household. Maybe that matters more on a ranch." She didn't believe it. Not really, but she said it anyway because the alternative was watching her family dissolve into nothing. Her father opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded slowly. 4 days, he said. "The stagecoach leaves Friday morning." Abigail spent those 4 days preparing for a future she couldn't imagine. She packed her carpet bag with practical items, 2 plain dresses, undergarments, a warm shawl, her mother's cookbook. No jewelry except her mother's simple wedding band, which she wore on a chain around her neck. No fancy hats or silk gloves. She was going to a ranch, not a ballroom. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, found her packing on Thursday evening. "I heard," the old woman said, settling into a chair without invitation. "Your sister ran off. Now you're going instead." Abigail kept folding clothes. "News travels fast. Your father talks when he's drunk?" "Which is always." Mrs. Chen studied her with sharp eyes. "You know what you're doing is crazy." "I know. You're going to arrive in Wyoming, tell this rancher he's been tricked, and hope he doesn't throw you out in the street. That's the plan." "That's not a plan. That's suicide." Abigail finally looked up. "What else can I do? Margaret's gone. My father's useless. If I don't try this, we're on the street by month's end. At least this way there's a chance." "A chance of what? That some lonely rancher will take pity on you?" "A chance at something different," Abigail said quietly. "I've spent my whole life being invisible. Maybe out west, that doesn't matter as much." Mrs. Chen sighed. "You're braver than you think, girl, or more foolish. Hard to tell the difference sometimes." That night, Abigail lay awake, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Fear crawled through her stomach like something living. She was about to board a stagecoach to a place she'd never seen, to meet a man who expected someone else, to start a life built on her sister's lies. But beneath the fear, something else stirred, something that felt almost like hope. Friday morning arrived gray and cold. Abigail dressed in her plainest traveling dress, brown wool that had seen better years. She pinned her dark hair back severely, no curls or softness. She looked in the cracked mirror and saw exactly what she expected. A thin, angular woman with tired eyes and rough hands. Nothing special, nothing worth traveling 1,500 miles for. Her father didn't come to see her off. She wasn't surprised. Mrs. Chen appeared instead, pressing a small package into Abigail's hands. "Dried fruit and bread," she said. "The food on those coaches is terrible." "Thank you," Abigail whispered. "Don't thank me yet. You might curse my name when you're freezing in some Wyoming snowstorm." The stagecoach waited at the depot, already half full with passengers heading west. Abigail climbed aboard, her carpet bag clutched tight, and found a seat wedged between a heavy-set merchant and a young mother with a crying baby. The driver cracked his whip. The horses lurched forward. Boston disappeared behind them. The first day of travel was miserable in ways Abigail hadn't anticipated. The coach jerked and rattled over rutted roads, throwing passengers against each other like dice in a cup. The merchant beside her fell asleep and snored like a wounded bear. The baby screamed for hours. Abigail stared out the window and watched civilization thin out into farmland, then prairie, then nothing but grass stretching to the horizon. She'd never seen so much space. On the second day, they stopped at a way station for fresh horses. Abigail climbed out, her legs cramping, her back screaming. The other passengers scattered to use the outhouse or stretch their legs. An older woman approached her, one of the passengers she hadn't spoken to yet. "You heading to Wyoming alone?" the woman asked. Abigail nodded. "Meeting someone there?" "Yes." The woman's face softened. Mail order bride? Abigail hesitated, then nodded again. It was easier than explaining the truth. Brave girl, the woman said. Or desperate? Which is it? Both, Abigail admitted. The woman laughed. Honest answer. You'll need that out west. Lies don't survive the frontier. It burns them away like morning frost. The words stayed with Abigail as they climbed back into the coach and continued west. Lies don't survive. But she was carrying a lie 1,500 miles, planning to deliver it to a man who'd built his hopes around it. What would the frontier do with that? Day 3 brought storms. Rain hammered the coach roof like fists. Lightning split the sky. The horses struggled through mud that sucked at the wheels. Inside, passengers huddled in damp misery, no one speaking, everyone praying they wouldn't overturn. Abigail pressed her face to the window and watched the storm rage across empty plains. The violence of it was terrifying and beautiful. Back in Boston, storms meant closing windows and waiting. Out here, storms were something alive, something wild. She understood suddenly why Margaret had run. The frontier wasn't just a place, it was a presence. It demanded everything from you or it crushed you. Margaret had known she wasn't strong enough. She'd known, and she'd run before the frontier could break her. But Abigail? She'd already been broken by smaller things, by poverty and invisibility and years of making herself useful to people who never saw her. Maybe the frontier was exactly where broken people belonged. On the 4th day, they crossed into Wyoming territory. The landscape changed. Mountains appeared on the horizon like jagged teeth. The grass gave way to sage and scrub. The air tasted different, thinner, sharper, clean in a way Boston had never been. Abigail felt something loosen in her chest. That evening, they stopped at another way station. A group of cowboys occupied the dining room, loud and rough, smelling of leather and horse and open sky. One of them caught Abigail staring and grinned. First time west? Is it that obvious? You got that look? Like you can't believe all this space exists. I can't, she admitted. He laughed. Give it time. Some folks never get used to it. They go crazy from too much horizon. Others, he gestured at the darkening plains. Others realize they've been suffocating their whole lives and didn't know it. That night, lying in a narrow bed in the way station's boarding room, Abigail made a decision. She wouldn't lie to Nathaniel Cross. She'd arrive in Cheyenne, tell him the truth immediately, and accept whatever came next. If he turned her away, she'd find work in town. If he was angry, she'd endure it. But she wouldn't start a life, any life, built on her sister's deception. The frontier burned away lies. She'd let it burn this one too. The 5th day was endless. Every mile brought her closer to Cheyenne, closer to the moment when she'd have to look a stranger in the eye and confess that she was the wrong woman. The unwanted woman. The replacement nobody asked for. The other passengers sensed her nervousness. You'll be fine, the young mother said, bouncing her now quiet baby. Men out here aren't like city men. They value different things. Like what? Abigail asked. Survival, the woman said simply. If you can survive, you're worth more than all the pretty faces in the world. Abigail wanted to believe her, but she'd seen how the world worked. Pretty open doors. Plane kept them closed. They reached Cheyenne at sunset on the 5th day. The town sprawled across the plains like something temporary, as if it might blow away in the next strong wind. Wooden buildings, dirt streets, horses tied to every post, men in dusty clothes moving with purpose. The air smelled of wood smoke and livestock. The stagecoach rolled to a stop outside the depot. Abigail's heart hammered so hard she thought she might be sick. The driver opened the door. Passengers spilled out, groaning and stretching. Abigail sat frozen, her carpet bag clutched in white-knuckled hands. Miss, the driver said. This is your stop. She forced herself to move, climbed down, stood on solid ground for the first time in 5 days, and saw him. A man stood near the depot entrance, tall and weather-worn, holding his hat in work-roughened hands. He wore clean clothes, but they sat awkwardly on him, like he wasn't used to dressing up. His face was hard angles and sun-damaged skin, his dark hair starting to gray at the temples. He looked to be in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. He was scanning the passengers with an expression that broke Abigail's heart, hope mixed with terror, like a man waiting for a verdict. Nathaniel Cross. It had to be. Their eyes met. His face changed. Confusion flickered across it. He'd been expecting Margaret, young and pretty and soft. Instead, he got Abigail, older and plain and worn down by life. Abigail made herself walk toward him. Every step felt like moving through deep water. "Mr. Cross?" she said. He nodded slowly. "Yes, I'm Nathaniel Cross." His voice was deep, rough from disuse, like he wasn't accustomed to talking much. "You're Margaret?" "No," Abigail said. The word came out steadier than she felt. "I'm Abigail, Margaret's sister." The hope in his face died. "I don't understand." People were starting to stare. Abigail could feel their curious eyes, their judgment. "Can we talk somewhere private?" she asked quietly. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once. "There's a boarding house nearby. We can talk there." He picked up her carpet bag without asking, his movements mechanical. They walked in silence through the dusty streets, Abigail struggling to keep up with his long strides. The boarding house was plain but clean. Nathaniel led her to a small sitting room off the entrance, closed the door, and turned to face her. "Explain," he said. Abigail forced herself to meet his eyes. "Margaret left. 3 days before she was supposed to travel here, she packed her belongings and disappeared. She abandoned the arrangement." His jaw tightened. "Why?" "I don't know. She didn't leave a note. She just ran. And you came instead." It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Why?" Abigail took a breath. "My family is in debt. We're about to lose everything. Margaret was supposed to marry you and send money home. When she left, I thought if I came here, told you the truth, maybe there was still a chance." "A chance for what?" "I don't know," Abigail admitted. "I didn't think that far ahead. I just knew I had to try." Nathaniel stared at her. In the lamplight, his face looked carved from stone. "So you're not Margaret. You're her older sister, and you traveled 1,500 miles to tell me I've been tricked." "Yes." "Did you know, before she ran, did you know she was planning this?" "No," Abigail said firmly. "If I'd known, I would have stopped her. I would have—" Her voice cracked. She steadied it. "I would have done something." Silence filled the room. Nathaniel turned away, staring out the window at the darkening street. Abigail watched his shoulders, the tension in them, and waited for the anger, the shouting, the accusations. Instead, when he spoke, his voice was quiet. "I've been writing those letters for 6 months, telling Margaret about the ranch, about my life, about my hopes." He laughed once, bitter. "I told her things I've never told anyone. And the whole time she was planning to run." "I'm sorry," Abigail whispered. "Why?" He turned back to her. "You didn't do this." "I'm still sorry." He studied her face, and Abigail made herself not look away, not try to hide what she was, plain and tired and desperate. "What did you expect would happen when you got here?" Nathaniel asked. "I expected you to be angry. I expected you to send me away." "And then what? What was your plan?" "Find work in town, send money home to my father, try to survive." "In Cheyenne? Alone?" "Yes." Nathaniel shook his head slowly. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," Abigail said. Something changed in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "At least you're honest." He walked to the door, and Abigail's stomach dropped. This was it. He was leaving. In a moment, she'd be alone in a strange town with almost no money and no prospects. But Nathaniel paused at the door. "It's late. You've been traveling for 5 days. I've paid for a room here. You'll stay tonight. Get some rest." "Mr. Cross, in the morning, we'll talk more. Figure out what comes next." He settled his hat back on his head. "Fair enough?" Abigail nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good night, then." He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Abigail stood alone in the sitting room, her legs shaking, and slowly sank into a chair. She'd done it, told him the truth. And he hadn't thrown her out, hadn't shouted, hadn't condemned her. What he'd do tomorrow, she had no idea. But for tonight, she had a room, a bed, a small pocket of safety in a strange town at the edge of the frontier. It was more than she'd dared hope for. The boarding house owner, a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Patterson, showed Abigail to a small room on the second floor. It held a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. "You need anything? You let me know," Mrs. Patterson said. She studied Abigail with the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen every kind of trouble. "You that girl Nathaniel Cross was waiting for?" "In a way," Abigail said. Mrs. Patterson snorted. "In a way? That's a story right there." She headed for the door, then paused. "Nathaniel's a good man. Keeps to himself, works himself half to death on that ranch of his. He deserves better than whatever mess brought you here." "I know," Abigail said quietly. After Mrs. Patterson left, Abigail sat on the bed and let herself shake. She'd crossed half the country on a lie, met a stranger who'd been expecting someone else, confessed the truth and somehow hadn't been destroyed for it. Tomorrow would bring consequences. She knew that. But tonight, alone in this small room with the sounds of Cheyenne drifting through the window, Abigail let herself feel something she hadn't felt in years. Relief. She'd stopped running from the truth. Whatever came next, at least it would be real. Abigail barely slept. Every sound jerked her awake. Horses in the street, voices from other rooms, the wind rattling the window. When pale light finally crept across the floor, she gave up and rose. Her reflection in the washstand mirror looked haggard, dark circles under her eyes, hair a mess, dress wrinkled from sleeping in it. She did her best to make herself presentable, but there was only so much fixing that could be done. A knock at the door made her jump. "Miss Mercer?" Mrs. Patterson's voice. "You awake?" Abigail opened the door. "Nathaniel's downstairs," Mrs. Patterson said. "Says he'd like to speak with you. You want breakfast first?" "No, thank you. I'll go down now." She found Nathaniel in the dining room, sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee. He'd shaved and looked slightly less exhausted than last night, but the tension in his shoulders remained. He stood when she entered. "Miss Mercer, did you sleep?" "Not much." "Neither did I." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit, please." Abigail sat. Mrs. Patterson appeared with coffee, set it in front of Abigail without a word, and disappeared. Nathaniel wrapped his hands around his cup. "I've been thinking all night about this situation." "So have I," Abigail said. "I'm not angry at you," he said. "That's the first thing you should know. You're not the one who lied. You're the one who told the truth, even though it cost you." Abigail felt something loosen in her chest. "But I don't know what to do now," Nathaniel continued. "I have a ranch 40 miles from here. I run it alone, which is damn near impossible. I've been looking for a wife because I need help, someone to manage the house, cook for the hands during roundup, help with the accounts. I thought Margaret—" He stopped, shook his head. "Doesn't matter what I thought." "I understand," Abigail said quietly. "Do you?" He looked at her directly. "I'm not looking for romance. I'm looking for a partner, someone strong enough to survive frontier life. Margaret's letters made her sound soft, delicate. I was willing to work with that, but I had my doubts." "And now you have me instead," Abigail said. "And I'm not soft or delicate, but I'm also not what you wanted." "No," Nathaniel agreed. "You're not what I expected." He paused. "But you traveled 1,500 miles to tell me the truth. That takes guts. More guts than most men I know would have." Abigail didn't know what to say to that. Nathaniel leaned back. "Here's what I'm thinking. You need a place to stay. I need help on the ranch. What if we make an arrangement, temporary, just to start? You come out to the ranch, stay for a month. Help with the house, the cooking, whatever needs doing. At the end of the month, we'll see if it's working. If it is, maybe we talk about something more permanent. If not, I'll help you find work in town." Abigail stared at him. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance. Same as you're offering me by being honest." "Why?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "Why would you do this?" Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. 6 months ago, I lost my foreman. He was the closest thing I had to family out here. He died in a riding accident, and suddenly I was running the ranch completely alone. I realized I couldn't do it anymore, not without help. So I placed an advertisement for a wife. He looked down at his coffee. "I'm 41 years old. I've spent 15 years building that ranch. I'm tired, Miss Mercer. I need help, and you need a place to be. Maybe we can help each other." It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even particularly kind, but it was honest, and honesty was something Abigail understood. 1 month, she said slowly. And if it doesn't work, you help me find other employment. That's right. What about marriage? Eventually? Nathaniel met her eyes. If we both decide it makes sense, we can discuss it. But let's see if we can stand each other first. Abigail almost laughed. It was the most practical marriage proposal she'd ever heard. Not that she'd heard many. She thought about her alternatives: return to Boston and face her father's collapse, stay in Cheyenne alone and try to find work in a town that didn't know her, or take this chance, strange as it was, with a man who at least respected her enough to be honest. All right, she said, 1 month. Nathaniel nodded once, something like relief crossing his face. We'll leave tomorrow morning. It's a full day's ride to the ranch. You'll need warmer clothes. It's colder up in the high country. I don't have money for clothes. I'll take care of it. Consider it part of the arrangement. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Nathaniel took her to the general store and helped her pick out practical items: wool dresses, a warm coat, sturdy boots. He paid without commenting on the cost, though Abigail saw him wince slightly at the total. That evening, back at the boarding house, Abigail sat in her room and tried to process what had happened. 24 hours ago, she'd been terrified of meeting Nathaniel Cross. Now she was preparing to ride out to his isolated ranch and spend a month learning if they could build some kind of life together. It was insane. It was also the most hopeful she'd felt in years. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Patterson entered, carrying a tray with dinner. "Thought you might want something in your room tonight," the older woman said. "You look like you've had enough excitement." "Thank you," Abigail said. Mrs. Patterson set down the tray, then hesitated. "I don't know what arrangement you've made with Nathaniel, and it's not my business. But I'll tell you this, he's a good man, hardworking, honest. He'll treat you fair." "I believe that," Abigail said. "The ranch is isolated, though, 40 miles from town, up in rough country. It's not an easy life." "I didn't come west expecting easy." Mrs. Patterson smiled slightly. "Good, because you won't find it." She headed for the door, then paused. "One more thing. Whatever your sister was running from, you're running toward. That makes all the difference." After she left, Abigail ate her dinner and thought about those words. Running toward. Her whole life she'd been running from things: poverty, invisibility, her own disappointment. But coming west, that was different. That was choosing something, even if she didn't fully understand what yet. She went to bed early and actually slept, exhaustion finally overcoming anxiety. When she woke the next morning, sunlight streamed through the window. Abigail dressed in her new practical clothes, wool dress, sturdy boots, warm coat. She looked in the mirror and saw someone different. Not pretty, not soft, but ready. Nathaniel was waiting downstairs with 2 horses. "You ride?" he asked. "Not well," Abigail admitted. "You'll learn. We've got a long day ahead." He helped her mount, awkward and ungraceful, but she managed. Then they rode out of Cheyenne as the town was waking up, heading into country that grew wilder with every mile. The landscape changed gradually. Flat plains gave way to rolling hills, then steep valleys carved by ancient rivers. Pine trees appeared, growing thicker as they climbed. The air turned sharp and clean. Nathaniel didn't talk much as they rode. Occasionally he'd point out a landmark or warn her about a rough section of trail. Mostly they traveled in silence, which Abigail found oddly comfortable. Around midday they stopped to rest the horses beside a creek. "How much farther?" Abigail asked, grateful to be off the horse. "Few more hours. We're making good time." She stretched her aching legs. "How long have you owned the ranch?" 15 years. Bought the land with money I saved working cattle drives. Built the house myself, most of the outbuildings. It's not fancy, but it's solid." "Do you run cattle?" "Cattle, some horses. Had a decent herd until last year's drought hit us hard. Lost about a quarter of my stock." He stared at the creek. "That's part of why I needed help. Can't rebuild alone." Abigail heard the exhaustion in his voice, bone deep, the kind that came from years of fighting alone. "I'll do my best," she said quietly. He looked at her. "I know you will. You came 1,500 miles on a lie that wasn't even yours. That tells me something about your character." They rode on. Late afternoon brought them to a high valley ringed by mountains, and there, tucked against a stand of pines, was the ranch. Abigail's first thought was that it looked lonely. The house was larger than she'd expected. 2 stories, wood construction with a wide porch. But the paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and several windows were cracked. Outbuildings dotted the property: barn, stable, what looked like a bunkhouse, all showing similar neglect. The fences needed repair. The yard was overgrown. Everything had a tired, abandoned look, as if the ranch had given up hope of being loved again. "It's rough," Nathaniel said, misreading her silence. "I know. I've been focused on keeping the cattle alive. The house has fallen behind." "It's not that," Abigail said. "It's just sad." Nathaniel looked at her sharply. "Sad? Like it's waiting for someone to care about it again." Something shifted in his expression. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I guess it is." They dismounted. Nathaniel showed her where to stable her horse, then led her to the house. Inside was worse than outside. Dust covered everything, dishes piled in the sink. The furniture was good quality but neglected, cushions faded, wood scratched. The whole place had the hollow feel of a house where someone existed but didn't live. "I'll show you your room," Nathaniel said, clearly embarrassed. He led her upstairs to a small bedroom with a bed, dresser, and another cracked window overlooking the valley. "There's bedding in the trunk, probably needs airing out." He gestured vaguely. "Kitchen's downstairs, obviously. Help yourself to whatever food we have. I'll be out checking the cattle before dark." "Nathaniel," Abigail said. He paused. "When was the last time someone cleaned this house?" He looked away. "My foreman's wife used to help before they left. That was 8 months ago. And since then, I've been managing." "By ignoring it?" He met her eyes, defensive. "I've been busy keeping the ranch running." "I know," Abigail said, softening her tone. "I'm not criticizing, I'm just taking stock." Nathaniel nodded once and left. Abigail stood in the dusty bedroom and looked around. 8 months of neglect. A lonely man working himself to death while his house fell apart around him. She thought about Mrs. Patterson's words. "You're running toward." Well, this was what she'd run toward: a broken ranch and a broken man, both desperately needing someone to care. Abigail set down her bag, rolled up her sleeves, and went downstairs to begin. The kitchen was a disaster. Abigail stood in the doorway and surveyed the damage with the clinical eye of someone who'd spent years managing impossible situations. Dishes crusted with old food filled the sink and spilled onto the counter. The stove was thick with grease. Something had died in the corner, a mouse probably, and no one had bothered to remove it. The whole room smelled of neglect and bachelor desperation. She found a bucket under the sink, filled it with water from the pump outside, and got to work. By the time Nathaniel returned at dusk, she'd made a dent. The dishes were washed and stacked, the counters scrubbed, the dead mouse disposed of. The floor was still filthy and the stove needed serious attention, but at least the kitchen looked like a place where food could be safely prepared. Nathaniel stopped in the doorway, staring. "You didn't have to do this tonight," he said. "I needed to eat," Abigail replied, wringing out a rag. "Couldn't cook in that mess." "There's beans and bacon in the pantry. I usually just heat them in the can and eat standing up," Abigail guessed. He had the grace to look embarrassed. "Something like that." "Well, I found the beans and the bacon, also found some potatoes that haven't completely rotted, an onion, and what I think used to be coffee." She gestured to the stove where a pot simmered. "It's not fancy, but it's hot, and it's actual food." Nathaniel crossed to the stove and lifted the lid. Steam rose, carrying the smell of something that actually resembled a meal. His expression did something complicated. "When's the last time you had a hot dinner?" Abigail asked quietly. "I don't remember," he admitted. They ate at the scarred kitchen table, not speaking much. Abigail watched Nathaniel shovel food into his mouth like a man who'd forgotten what eating could be when it wasn't just fuel. He finished his first helping and reached for seconds without asking. "It's good," he said finally. "It's beans and bacon. It's better than what I've been eating." After dinner, Nathaniel disappeared to tend the horses while Abigail tackled the rest of the dishes. Her hands ached from scrubbing, her back hurt from bending over the sink. And she'd only been here a few hours. A month of this, of trying to resurrect a house that had been dying for 8 months, suddenly seemed impossible. But she'd done impossible things before. When Nathaniel came back inside, he found her sitting at the table making a list by lamplight. "What's that?" he asked. "Inventory?" Things that need fixing, cleaning, replacing. She showed him the paper, already half filled with her tight handwriting. The house needs work. A lot of work. He glanced at the list and winced. I know. I'm not complaining. I'm planning. If I'm going to be here a month, I want to know what I'm dealing with. Nathaniel pulled out a chair and sat. Most of those things can wait. The ranch comes first, the cattle, the fences, the equipment. The ranch is the business, Abigail said. The house is where you live. Both matter. The house doesn't make money. No, but it's where you come back when the work's done. It should be, she struggled for the right word. It should be worth coming back to. Nathaniel stared at her for a long moment. My foreman used to say something like that. His wife, Sarah, she kept the house nice, made it feel like home. After they left, I guess I stopped seeing the point. Why'd they leave? Sarah got pregnant. She had complications, nearly died. The doctor in Cheyenne said she needed to be somewhere with better medical care. So Tom, my foreman, he took her back east. I don't blame them. Frontier life is hard enough without risking your wife's life. Do you hear from them? Got a letter last year. They're in Ohio. Sarah's fine, baby's healthy. Tom's working at his brother's mill. Nathaniel's voice went flat. He's happy. That's what matters. Abigail heard what he didn't say, that losing Tom and Sarah had broken something in him, had turned this ranch from a home into just a place where work happened. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. Like I said, I don't blame them. He stood abruptly. It's late. We both should sleep. I'll be up before dawn to check the north fence. You don't need to get up that early. What time do you usually eat breakfast? I don't. I grab something cold and eat while I ride. That's terrible for you. It's efficient. It's killing you slowly, Abigail said. What if I have breakfast ready by 5:30? Would you eat it before you leave? Nathaniel looked at her like she'd suggested something radical. You don't have to do that. I know, but if I'm going to cook anyway, I might as well cook for both of us. He nodded slowly. 5:30 then. After he left, Abigail sat alone in the kitchen, listening to his footsteps cross the floor above her. A moment later, she heard a door close. Then silence. She looked around the kitchen, still grimy despite her efforts, and felt the weight of what she'd agreed to settle on her shoulders. 1 month in this isolated place with a man she barely knew, trying to resurrect a house that had given up. But she'd chosen this, run toward it, as Mrs. Patterson had said. Now she just had to make it work. Abigail woke at 5 to the sound of boots on the stairs. She dressed quickly in the dim pre-dawn light and hurried to the kitchen. Nathaniel was already there, pulling on his coat. I said 5:30, Abigail said. I know. I'm heading out early. There's a section of fence that, sit down, she interrupted. He blinked. What? Sit down. I'm making breakfast and you're going to eat it. Miss Mercer, it's Abigail. And you hired me to help run this household, which includes making sure you don't starve to death, so sit. For a moment she thought he might argue. Then something that might have been amusement crossed his face, and he sat. Abigail worked quickly. She'd found eggs in the henhouse the night before. Apparently the chickens were the only well-tended things on the property. She scrambled them with some of the bacon, toasted bread on the stove, and poured coffee that was actually drinkable. Nathaniel ate in silence, but she saw his shoulders relax slightly. When he finished, he stood and carried his plate to the sink. Thank you, he said. You're welcome. What time will you be back? Late afternoon, probably. I need to move some cattle to better grazing. I'll have dinner ready. He paused at the door. You don't have to do all this, you know. The arrangement was help with the house, not wait on me. I'm not waiting on you. I'm cooking because we both need to eat. If that bothers you, you can cook your own meals. No? Nathaniel said quickly. No, it doesn't bother me. I want to make sure you're not... He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. Not what? Not being taken advantage of? Abigail almost laughed. Mr. Cross, Nathaniel, I traveled 1,500 miles to take my sister's place in a marriage arrangement she abandoned. If anyone's being taken advantage of, it's you. I don't see it that way. Then we're even. He nodded once and left. Abigail spent the morning attacking the house with the same stubborn determination that had gotten her through 26 years of poverty. She scrubbed floors until her knees ached, washed windows until her arms felt like lead, beat dust from curtains until she couldn't stop coughing. The house fought back. Years of neglect didn't surrender easily. But gradually, slowly, things began to shift. The windows let in more light. The floors stopped being sticky underfoot. The smell of abandonment started to fade. Around noon, Abigail heard horses outside. She went to the window and saw two men riding up, ranch hands, she assumed. They dismounted near the barn, saw her watching, and one of them waved uncertainly. She went outside to meet them. Both men were young, maybe early 20s, with the weathered skin of people who worked outdoors. The taller one pulled off his hat. "Ma'am," he said, "we're looking for Nathaniel Cross. He's checking the north fence. Won't be back until later." The men exchanged glances. You're the woman he went to fetch from Cheyenne?" "I'm Abigail Mercer." "I'm Jack," the tall one said. "This is Charlie. We work here during roundup and branding season. Nathaniel said he was bringing back a wife." "The situation is more complicated than that," Abigail said carefully. "Isn't it always?" Charlie said, grinning. He was stockier than Jack, with a friendly face. "Well, welcome to Cross Ranch, Miss Mercer. Fair warning, it's not much to look at." "I've noticed." Jack laughed. "Honest, that's good. You'll need that out here." He gestured to the barn. "We came to check on some equipment Nathaniel wanted repaired. We'll be out of your way in an hour or so." "Would you like coffee?" Abigail heard herself offer. Both men looked surprised. "We don't want to impose," Jack said. "You're not. I made a pot this morning. It'll just go to waste otherwise." She brought them coffee on the porch, and they sat on the sagging steps, clearly trying not to stare at her too obviously. "So," Charlie said after a moment, "you really came all the way from... where was it?" "Boston." "Boston. That's a hell of a trip." "It was long," Abigail agreed. "And you're planning to stay, out here in the middle of nowhere?" "For a month, at least. After that," she shrugged. "We'll see." Jack studied her. "You know what you're getting into? Winters here are brutal. We're 40 miles from town. The nearest neighbor is 8 miles away. It gets lonely." "I'm used to difficult situations," Abigail said. "This isn't just difficult," Charlie said. "This is isolated. Sarah, Tom's wife, she went a little crazy her first winter here. Cried for 3 days straight because she missed seeing other women." "I'm not Sarah." "No offense, ma'am, but you don't look like ranch wife material either." Abigail bristled. "What's ranch wife material supposed to look like?" Charlie backtracked. "I just mean you look like a city woman, refined. This life is rough. I spent my childhood in Boston tenements, scrubbing floors for landlords who barely considered us human," Abigail said flatly. "I've lived on soup and bread for weeks at a time. I've sewn the same dress until it was more patches than fabric. I might look refined to you, but I assure you I know rough." Both men fell silent. "Sorry, ma'am," Jack said finally. "We didn't mean to insult you." "You didn't insult me. You underestimated me. People have been doing that my whole life." She stood. "I need to get back to work. Leave the cups on the step when you're done." She went inside, her heart pounding with anger she hadn't expected to feel. But their words had touched something raw. This assumption that because she wasn't pretty, wasn't young, wasn't what they expected, she must be weak. She attacked the stove with renewed fury, scrubbing grease that had probably been accumulating since Sarah left. Her hands turned red, her back screamed, but she kept working until the stove looked almost new. When Nathaniel returned that afternoon, he found her in the kitchen, surrounded by cleaning supplies, looking exhausted and furious. "What happened?" he asked immediately. "Your ranch hands came by." "Jack and Charlie?" "What did they say?" "They questioned whether I was ranch wife material." Abigail threw the scrub brush in the bucket. "As if there's some standard I'm supposed to meet." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "I'll talk to them." "Don't. They weren't trying to be cruel, they just..." She sighed. "They see a city woman and assume I'll fall apart the first time things get hard." "Will you?" Abigail met his eyes. "No." Something shifted in his expression. "I believe you." "Why?" "Because you've been here less than 24 hours and you've already done more to fix this house than I've done in 8 months. Because you got angry instead of crying when those boys doubted you. Because..." He gestured vaguely at the kitchen, now recognizably clean. "Because you don't do anything halfway." Abigail felt something warm uncurl in her chest. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You haven't survived a full week." but he was almost smiling when he said it. The days fell into a rhythm. Nathaniel left before dawn to work the ranch. Abigail spent her mornings battling the house, her afternoons preparing meals, her evenings too tired to do anything but collapse. They ate dinner together, talked briefly about practical things, what needed fixing, what supplies they needed from town, then retreated to their separate spaces. It wasn't friendship exactly, but it was comfortable. On the fifth day, Abigail decided to tackle the upstairs. Nathaniel's bedroom was at the end of the hall, door always closed. She hesitated before knocking. "Come in," his voice called. She opened the door and stopped. The room was almost monastic, a bed, a dresser, a single chair. No decorations, no personal items except a battered book on the nightstand. It looked like a place where someone slept but didn't live. Nathaniel was sitting on the bed, pulling off his boots. He looked up, surprised. "I was going to clean the upstairs," Abigail said. "I wanted permission before I touched your room." "You don't need permission. Clean whatever you want. This is your private space." "It's a room," Nathaniel said, "not a shrine. If it needs cleaning, clean it." Abigail nodded and started to leave, then paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why does this place feel so empty? Even with furniture, even with your things here, it feels like no one lives here." Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. "After Sarah and Tom left, I stopped seeing the point of making it feel like home. Home is for people with families, with futures. I just had work." "You don't have a future?" "I have a ranch to run. That's different." "Is it?" He looked at her, and for a moment she saw past the hardened exterior to something vulnerable underneath. "I don't know anymore." That night, Abigail lay in bed thinking about Nathaniel's words. He'd built this ranch, lived here for 15 years, but he didn't consider it home. It was just the place where he worked himself to exhaustion day after day. She understood that. She'd lived in her family's apartment for years without ever calling it home. Home was supposed to be a place where you belonged, where you mattered. Neither of them had ever had that. Maybe that's what drew them together. Not romance or attraction, but a shared understanding of what it meant to be lonely. The first week turned into 2. Abigail transformed the house gradually, room by room. She fixed the sagging porch with boards she found in the barn, patched the cracked windows with materials from town that Nathaniel brought back without her asking, organized the pantry, the storage rooms, even the disaster that was the tack room. The ranch hands, Jack and Charlie, came by more frequently, supposedly to check equipment, but really, Abigail suspected, to see if she'd given up yet. She served them coffee and pretended not to notice their surprise when she didn't collapse from exhaustion. One afternoon, Charlie found her on a ladder, replacing a broken section of gutter. "Ma'am, you shouldn't be doing that," he said, alarmed. "That's dangerous. The gutter was falling off. It needed fixing. Let me do it. Or wait for Nathaniel." "Nathaniel has enough to do, and I'm perfectly capable of replacing a gutter. But if you fall, then I fall. I've fallen before. I survived." She hammered in another nail. "Stop treating me like I'm made of glass." Charlie held the ladder steady, shaking his head. "You're stubborn." "Thank you. That wasn't a compliment. I'm taking it as one anyway." That evening, when Nathaniel came in for dinner, he noticed the new gutter immediately. "You fixed that?" "It was falling off. You could have waited for me." "You were busy. I wasn't." Abigail set a plate in front of him. "Eat before it gets cold." He sat but kept looking at her. "You're not afraid of anything, are you?" "I'm afraid of plenty of things. I just don't let fear stop me from doing what needs doing." "Like coming west to take your sister's place?" "Like that, yes." Nathaniel cut into his food. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you did." It was the closest thing to affection he'd shown since she arrived. Abigail felt warmth spread through her chest. "So am I," she said quietly. The third week brought the first real test. Abigail woke to find Nathaniel already in the kitchen, moving stiffly and favoring his right side. "What happened?" she asked. "Nothing, just slept wrong." "You're hurt." "I'm fine." "Nathaniel," she crossed her arms. "What happened?" He sighed. "A fence post broke while I was repairing it yesterday. Caught me in the ribs. It's just bruised." "Let me see." "It's fine." "Let me see." He pulled up his shirt reluctantly, revealing a massive bruise spreading across his right side, purple and black and angry looking. Abigail sucked in a breath. That needs a doctor. It's just a bruise. It could be a broken rib. I've had broken ribs before. This isn't that bad. You're impossible. I'm practical. The doctor is 40 miles away. By the time I ride there and back, I'll have lost a full day of work. For what? So he can tell me to rest, which I can't afford to do anyway? Abigail wanted to argue, but she saw the truth in his eyes. He was right. The ranch couldn't stop just because he was hurt. And if the rib wasn't broken, there was nothing a doctor could do anyway. Then you rest today, she said. Stay here. I'll handle the morning work. You don't know how to handle cattle. I'm not talking about cattle. I'm talking about the chickens, the milking, basic chores, things that don't require you to risk making that injury worse. Abigail, please, she met his eyes. Just today. Let yourself heal. Tomorrow, if you're not worse, you can go back to working yourself to death. He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. Just today. Abigail spent the morning handling the small tasks around the ranch, feeding chickens, collecting eggs, milking the cow they kept for household use. It was harder than it looked. The cow kicked her twice. The chickens were demonic. By the time she finished, she was sweating and frustrated and had new respect for the work Nathaniel did before she even woke up. She found him in the kitchen, trying to make coffee one-handed. Sit down, she ordered. I can make coffee. Not without hurting yourself. Sit. He sat, looking annoyed but too tired to argue. Abigail made coffee, then went to find the medical supplies she'd seen in the pantry. She returned with strips of cloth. I'm going to wrap your ribs, she said. That's not necessary. Yes, it is. If it's just bruised, compression will help. If it's cracked, it'll keep you from making it worse. She held up the cloth. I can do it or you can, but it's getting done. Nathaniel pulled off his shirt with obvious difficulty. Abigail tried not to stare at the lean muscle, the scars, the weathered skin that came from 15 years of frontier life. She focused on the bruise instead, dark and spreading. This is going to hurt, she warned. I know. She wrapped his ribs carefully, pulling the cloth tight. Nathaniel hissed but didn't complain. When she finished, she stepped back. How's that? He took a careful breath. Better. Thank you. You're welcome. Now rest. I need to check the south pasture. No, you don't. You need to sit here and not make that injury worse. She softened her tone. Please, Nathaniel, just today. He looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. You're worried about me. Of course I'm worried. You're hurt. No one's worried about me in a long time. The words hung in the air between them. Abigail felt her throat tighten. Well, someone is now, she said quietly, so stop being stubborn and rest. He smiled, actually smiled, small but genuine. Yes, ma'am. Nathaniel spent the day resting, though he clearly hated every minute of it. Abigail caught him trying to sneak outside twice and chased him back in both times. By evening, the bruise looked slightly less angry, and he was moving with less pain. They ate dinner in unusual silence. Finally, Nathaniel spoke. I'm not used to being taken care of, he said. I noticed. Feels strange, not bad, just strange. You've been alone too long, Abigail said. Maybe. He looked at her. You're good at this. Taking care of things. People. I've had practice. Spent my whole life managing my family's disasters. That why you're so good at managing mine? Abigail almost laughed. Is that what I'm doing? Seems like it. You've fixed my house, organized my kitchen, made sure I actually eat meals instead of cold beans. Now you're wrapping my injuries and forcing me to rest. If that's not managing disasters, I don't know what is. Your life isn't a disaster, Abigail said. It's just complicated. That's a kind word for it. They fell silent again. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the valley in shades of gold and red. Abigail watched the light change and felt something settle in her chest, something that felt almost like peace. 3 weeks, Nathaniel said suddenly. What? You've been here 3 weeks. 1 more week, and the trial period is over. Abigail's heart jumped. She'd been so focused on surviving day to day that she'd almost forgotten about the deadline. Right, she said carefully. 1 more week. Have you thought about what you want to do after? Some. Have you? Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. I think I have, but I want to know what you're thinking first. That's not fair. You're the one who set the terms. And you're the one who traveled 1,500 miles not knowing what you'd find. I think you've earned the right to speak first. Abigail took a breath. I want to stay. The words came out before she could second-guess them. Nathaniel's eyes snapped to hers. You do? Yes. I don't know if that means marriage or just continuing this arrangement, but I want to stay. This place, it needs work, needs attention, but it feels more like home than anywhere I've lived. And you, she struggled for the right words. You're a good man, Nathaniel. You're honest and hardworking, and you don't pretend to be something you're not. I'd like to keep helping you build this ranch into something that matters. Nathaniel stared at her, his expression unreadable. Abigail felt panic start to rise. She'd said too much, been too honest. He was going to tell her the month was enough, that she should find work in town, that marry me, he said. Abigail blinked. What? Not because of the arrangement, not because I need help, because you're the first person in years who's made this place feel like it could be home again. He leaned forward. I'm not offering romance. I'm still not good at that. But I'm offering partnership, a real one. You and me, building this ranch together, making it into something that lasts. That's the second least romantic proposal I've ever heard, Abigail said. What was the least romantic? The first time you offered me this arrangement. Nathaniel almost smiled. So what do you say? Abigail thought about her alternatives. She could go to Cheyenne, find work, live a safe and separate life, or she could stay here, marry this complicated man, and try to build something real out of all the broken pieces they'd both been carrying. It wasn't even a choice. Yes, she said, I'll marry you. Something that might have been relief crossed Nathaniel's face. When? Whenever you want. Next Sunday? We can ride to Cheyenne, find someone to do it proper. Sunday works. They sat there, newly engaged, not touching, barely smiling. It should have felt strange or wrong or incomplete. Instead, it felt right in a way Abigail couldn't explain. They'd both been running from broken lives. Now they were choosing to run towards something together. That night, lying in bed, Abigail stared at the ceiling and felt her future shift into focus. She'd come west expecting rejection. Instead, she'd found a place that needed her, work that mattered, and a man who saw her value even when she couldn't see it herself. It wasn't the life she'd imagined. It was better. Because it was real. Sunday came faster than Abigail expected. They left before dawn, riding side by side through country that was just starting to wake up. The sky turned from black to gray to pale pink, and Abigail watched the valley transform in the early light, thinking that in a few hours she'd be married to the man riding silently beside her. She wasn't nervous. That surprised her. She should have been terrified, marrying a near stranger, committing to a life on an isolated ranch, burning every bridge back to her old existence. But instead, she felt calm, settled, like pieces were finally falling into place after years of being scattered. Nathaniel hadn't said much since they'd left. He rode with that same quiet intensity he brought to everything, his jaw set, his eyes on the trail ahead. Around mid-morning, he finally spoke. You can still change your mind. Abigail looked at him. Can you? No. Then neither can I. They rode in silence for another mile. Then Nathaniel said, I want you to know something. I don't expect this to be a real marriage. Not right away. Maybe not ever, if that's what you want. What do you mean? I mean, we'll have separate rooms. You'll have your privacy. I won't. He stopped, clearly uncomfortable. I won't make demands on you. This is a partnership first. Anything else would have to be your choice. Abigail felt something warm spread through her chest. You're a good man, Nathaniel Cross. I'm a practical man. There's a difference. Is there? He didn't answer, but she saw his shoulders relax slightly. They reached Cheyenne around noon. The town looked different to Abigail now, less terrifying, more familiar. She'd only been here once before, but that first visit felt like it belonged to a different person. The frightened woman who'd stepped off the stagecoach 4 weeks ago was gone. In her place was someone harder, more certain. Nathaniel led them to a small church on the edge of town. The minister was an old man with kind eyes, who didn't ask too many questions when Nathaniel explained they wanted to marry today. You have witnesses? The minister asked. No, Nathaniel admitted. I'll find someone. Wait here. He disappeared and returned 5 minutes later with Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house. She took one look at Abigail and broke into a wide smile. Well, she said, I had a feeling you two would figure it out. You did? Abigail asked. Nathaniel looked at you like you were a puzzle he wanted to solve, and you looked at him like he was a project worth finishing. Mrs. Patterson settled into a pew. That's as good a foundation as any. The ceremony was brief. No flowers, no music, just the minister's words and Abigail's hand in Nathaniel's. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid. When the minister asked if she took this man, Abigail said yes without hesitation. Nathaniel's voice was steady when he made the same promise. You may kiss the bride, the minister said. Nathaniel leaned down and pressed a quick, awkward kiss to Abigail's lips. It was chaste and nervous and over in a heartbeat. But it was real. They were married. Mrs. Patterson insisted on buying them dinner at the hotel restaurant. You can't get married and just ride home, she said firmly. That's not how this works. So they sat in the restaurant, eating roast chicken that Abigail barely tasted, while Mrs. Patterson talked about town gossip and asked pointed questions about their plans. You staying on the ranch permanently? She asked Abigail. That's the idea. Good. That place needs a woman's touch. Nathaniel's been letting it fall apart for too long. She looked at him. No offense. None taken, Nathaniel said. You're right. And you? Mrs. Patterson turned back to Abigail. You think you can handle frontier life? It's not like Boston. I never liked Boston much anyway. Smart girl. Mrs. Patterson stood. I need to get back. Congratulations to you both. Come visit when you're in town. After she left, Nathaniel and Abigail sat in awkward silence. Finally, Nathaniel said, We should probably head back. Still have a few hours of daylight. Right. Of course. They rode home as husband and wife, the words feeling strange and new. When they reached the ranch at dusk, Abigail looked at the house, her house now, officially, and felt something shift inside her. This wasn't temporary anymore. This was permanent. That night, Nathaniel helped her carry her few belongings from the guest room to the larger bedroom at the front of the house. This was going to be... He stopped. This was supposed to be the marriage room. I cleaned it out before I left for Cheyenne the first time. You should have it. What about you? I'll stay in my room. Like I said, we'll have our own spaces. He left before Abigail could respond. She stood in the empty bedroom, larger than the one she'd been using, with a real bed frame and a window overlooking the valley, and felt the weight of the day settle on her shoulders. She was married, to a man she'd known for a month, who'd promised her partnership but not love, who was currently sleeping in a different room like they were strangers sharing a house. It should have felt wrong. Instead, it felt like the most honest thing that had ever happened to her. The next morning started like any other. Nathaniel was gone before sunrise. Abigail made breakfast, tended the chickens, started tackling the disaster that was the storage shed. But now there was a difference, a weight on her left hand where Nathaniel had placed a simple gold band the day before. Every time she looked at it, something in her chest tightened. Jack and Charlie showed up around mid-morning, ostensibly to fix some equipment, but really, Abigail suspected, to see if the marriage rumors were true. So, Charlie said, accepting coffee on the porch, we heard you and the boss went to Cheyenne yesterday. We did. And that you came back married. That's right. Jack whistled low. Fast work. We had an arrangement, Abigail said. We decided to make it permanent. That's one way to put it, Charlie said, grinning. Congratulations, Mrs. Cross. The name hit Abigail like a physical thing. Mrs. Cross. She was Mrs. Cross now, not Miss Mercer, not the replacement sister, not the woman nobody wanted, Mrs. Cross. Thank you, she said quietly. The days that followed fell into a new rhythm. Married but separate, partners but not lovers, building something that didn't have a name yet. Nathaniel worked the ranch. Abigail worked the house. They ate meals together, discussed practical matters, existed in the same space without quite touching. It was comfortable, safe. And increasingly, Abigail found herself wanting more. She caught herself watching Nathaniel more often. The way he moved, efficient and purposeful. The rare smile when something went right. The exhaustion in his eyes at the end of long days. She wanted to ease that exhaustion, to give him something beyond hot meals and a clean house. But she didn't know how to bridge the gap between partnership and something deeper. 2 weeks after the wedding, spring storms rolled in. Abigail woke to rain hammering the roof and wind rattling the windows. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Nathaniel already in the kitchen, staring out at the downpour. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad. The creek's going to flood if this keeps up." He pulled on his rain slicker. "I need to move the cattle to higher ground." "I'll help." "Abigail, you don't know how to herd cattle." "Then teach me. You can't do this alone in weather like this." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Get dressed warm. This is going to be miserable." Miserable was an understatement. Within minutes of riding out, Abigail was soaked through despite her rain gear. The wind cut like knives. The cattle were spooked and uncooperative, scattering in every direction. Nathaniel shouted instructions that got lost in the storm. Abigail did her best to follow, pushing the stupid animals toward higher ground, while her horse slipped in mud and rain poured down her neck. They'd been working for over an hour when Nathaniel suddenly shouted, "The calves!" Abigail looked where he was pointing and saw 3 young calves trapped in a bend of the creek, the water rising fast around them. They were bawling in terror, too small in panic to save themselves. Nathaniel spurred his horse toward the creek without hesitation. "Nathaniel, wait!" Abigail screamed, but he was already dismounting, already wading into the rushing water. The current was stronger than it looked. It caught Nathaniel immediately, nearly knocking him off his feet. He grabbed a calf, struggled toward the bank, managed to shove it onto solid ground. Went back for the second one. That's when things went wrong. The creek surged, swollen with upstream runoff. The water jumped from knee-deep to waist-deep in seconds. Nathaniel lost his footing, went under, came up gasping. Abigail didn't think. She jumped off her horse, grabbed the rope from her saddle, and ran toward the creek. The cold water hit her like a wall, stealing her breath, trying to drag her downstream. "Rope!" she screamed, throwing the end toward Nathaniel. He caught it with one hand while holding a terrified calf with the other. Abigail wrapped her end around a tree and pulled with everything she had. Her boots slipped in mud, her arms screamed, but inch by inch she dragged Nathaniel and the calf toward the bank. He made it to shallow water and shoved the calf to safety. But the third calf was still out there, bawling as the water rose around it. "Leave it!" Abigail shouted. "Can't!" Nathaniel turned back. "Nathaniel, no!" But he was already wading deeper, fighting current that wanted to sweep him away. Abigail saw the moment he reached the calf, saw him lift it, saw the surge of water that hit him from behind. He went under. Sometimes, love is revealed in the exact second someone risks everything for another human being. And in that freezing river, both of them finally understood what they truly meant to each other. Abigail didn't remember deciding to move. One moment she was on the bank, the next she was in the water, rope tied around her waist, fighting toward where Nathaniel had disappeared. The current was a living thing, trying to kill her. It filled her mouth, her nose, dragged at her legs. But she kept moving, kept searching, until her hand hit something solid. Nathaniel. She grabbed his coat and pulled with strength she didn't know she had. His head broke the surface. He was still holding the calf, the stubborn bastard, even half drowned. "Let go of the damn calf!" she screamed. "Got it!" They fought their way to the bank together, pulling each other and the calf through water that wanted them dead. When they finally collapsed on solid ground, both gasping, both shaking, Abigail wanted to hit him and hold him at the same time. "You could have died," she said, her voice breaking. "So could you. You jumped in after me. Because you were drowning. Because you care," Nathaniel said, looking at her with something raw in his eyes. "Of course I care, you idiot. You're my husband." "Is that the only reason?" Abigail stared at him, soaked and shivering and alive, and felt something break open inside her. "No," she said. "No, that's not the only reason." "Then what?" "Because you matter to me. Because when I saw you go under, I couldn't breathe. Because the thought of losing you," her voice cracked. "Because I care about you, Nathaniel, more than I plan to, more than I know what to do with." Nathaniel reached for her, his hand cold and shaking. "I care about you too," he said quietly. "Probably have since you showed up in Cheyenne and told me the truth instead of lying. I just didn't know how to say it." "You're saying it now." "Yeah, I guess I am." They sat there in the mud and rain, holding hands like teenagers while the storm raged around them and the calves they'd nearly died for huddled nearby. Finally, Nathaniel said, "We should get back. Get dry before we freeze. The cattle are safe enough for now. You're more important." It was the first time he'd said something like that. Abigail felt tears mix with rain on her face. They rode back slowly, exhausted and freezing. At the house, Nathaniel insisted Abigail change first while he tended the horses. She stripped off her soaked clothes with shaking hands and dressed in dry things that felt like heaven. When Nathaniel came in, dripping and pale, she had coffee ready and a fire going in the stove. "Sit," she ordered. He sat without argument, too tired to fight. Abigail brought him dry clothes, then went to make soup while he changed. When she returned to the kitchen, he was still shivering despite the dry clothes and the fire. "You need to warm up properly," she said. "Come on." She led him to the bedroom, her bedroom, the one he'd given her after the wedding, and made him lie down. Then she climbed in beside him, wrapping herself around his cold body. Nathaniel stiffened. "Abigail." "Hush. You're freezing. I'm warm. This is practical." "Is that what this is? Do you want me to leave?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "No." They lay there, tangled together, warming each other slowly. Abigail felt Nathaniel's heartbeat against her cheek, steady and strong, felt his breathing slow as the shivering stopped. "I thought you wanted separate rooms," he said quietly. "I thought I did too. What changed? I almost lost you today. Made me realize I didn't want separate anything anymore." Nathaniel's arm tightened around her. "I nearly got us both killed going after those calves. You were trying to save them. I was being stupid, risking my life for cattle. You were being you," Abigail said, "caring about things, even when it's dangerous, even when it's not practical." She looked up at him. "I love that about you." The word hung between them. Love. She'd said it without planning to, but she didn't take it back. Nathaniel cupped her face with a rough hand. "I don't know how to be a husband, the romantic kind. I'm not good at pretty words or grand gestures. I don't want pretty words. I want this. You and me building something real. Even after I nearly drowned us both? Especially after that. Because you showed me who you are when things go wrong. And I want to be there for all of it. The disasters and the normal days and everything in between." Nathaniel kissed her then, and it wasn't awkward like at the wedding. It was desperate and grateful and real. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Abigail saw tears on his face. "I don't deserve you," he said. "Yes, you do, and I don't deserve you either, so we're even." They fell asleep tangled together, exhausted and alive, the storm still raging outside. When Abigail woke hours later, Nathaniel was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked. "I was just thinking. I spent 6 months writing letters to your sister, telling her about this place, about my life. And the whole time I was writing to the wrong woman." "You think so?" "I know so. Margaret would have run screaming from that flood. You jumped in without thinking twice. That wasn't bravery. That was terror. It was love," Nathaniel said quietly. "You were terrified and you did it anyway. That's what love looks like." Abigail felt tears prick her eyes. "When did you get so good with words?" "I'm not. I'm just telling the truth." They stayed in bed until hunger forced them up. Abigail made a late dinner while Nathaniel checked that the storm hadn't done more damage to the house. They ate together, not talking much, but the silence felt different now. Comfortable. Intimate. That night, Nathaniel didn't go back to his room. He stayed with Abigail, holding her like she might disappear, and she held him back just as tightly. The storm blew itself out by morning, leaving the valley washed clean and glittering. Nathaniel went out to assess the damage while Abigail started breakfast. When he came back, his face was grim. "How bad?" she asked. "Lost some fence. A section of the barn roof is damaged. The south pasture is flooded." He sat heavily. "It's going to take weeks to fix everything. Then we'll fix it, together." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. We're partners, remember? For better or worse." She set coffee in front of him. "What do we tackle first?" Nathaniel looked at her with something like wonder. "The fence? We need to contain the herd before they wander off." "Then that's what we'll do." They spent the next week repairing storm damage. Abigail learned to mend fence, to patch roof, to do a dozen things she'd never imagined doing. Her hands blistered, her back ached, but she kept working beside Nathaniel, matching him hour for hour. Jack and Charlie showed up to help, clearly shocked to see Abigail hammering fence posts alongside the men. "You know you don't have to do this, Mrs. Cross," Jack said carefully. "I know, I want to." "Why?" "Because it's my ranch too now." The words surprised her as much as they surprised the men, but they were true. Somewhere in the past month, this place had become hers. Not because she'd married Nathaniel, but because she'd chosen it, chosen the work, the isolation, the brutal honesty of frontier life. Charlie grinned. "Boss, I think you married yourself a ranch wife after all." Nathaniel looked at Abigail, and the pride in his eyes made her chest tight. "Yeah," he said. "I think I did." That night, exhausted and satisfied, they sat on the newly repaired porch and watched the sun set over the valley. "You know what I realized today?" Nathaniel said. "What?" "This is the first time since Tom and Sarah left that this place feels alive again, like it has a future." "It does have a future," Abigail said, "because of you. Because of us." She leaned against his shoulder. "You built this ranch. I'm just helping you remember why it matters. It matters because you're here." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The wind whispered through pine trees. The ranch settled into night around them. Abigail thought about the frightened woman who'd stepped off the stagecoach 6 weeks ago. That woman had been running from failure, carrying lies, expecting rejection. Now she sat beside her husband on a porch they'd repaired together, part of something real and permanent. "I'm glad Margaret ran," Abigail said suddenly. Nathaniel turned to look at her. "What?" "I'm glad she abandoned the arrangement. If she hadn't, I never would have come here, never would have found this place, found you." "You think she knew? That you'd come instead?" "No, she was just saving herself. But she saved me too, in a way. Gave me the push I needed to stop being invisible." "You were never invisible," Nathaniel said. "Not to me. I was to myself, though. I'd spent so long being the sister nobody wanted that I forgot I could be anything else." She looked at him. "You reminded me." "How?" "By seeing me. Not as a replacement or a second choice, but as myself. Flaws and all." Nathaniel pulled her closer. "I don't see flaws. I see strength." "That's because you're biased." "Damn right I am. You're my wife." They went inside as the temperature dropped. Nathaniel built up the fire while Abigail made tea. They sat together on the worn sofa, another thing that needed replacing eventually, and just existed in the same space. "Can I ask you something?" Abigail said. "Anything." "What made you place that advertisement? For a wife?" Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. "Loneliness, mostly. I woke up one morning and realized I'd been alone for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone to talk to. Someone who cared if I came home at night." He stared into his tea. "Tom used to say the ranch was just a place until you had someone to share it with." I didn't understand what he meant until after he left. Then I understood too well. "Do you hear from him much?" "Christmas cards. A letter now and then. He's happy in Ohio, got a second kid on the way." No bitterness in his voice, just acceptance. "He made the right choice for his family." "And you made the right choice for yours," Abigail said. "Did I? Marrying a woman I'd known a month? You're asking me if you made the right choice?" "I guess I am." Abigail set down her tea and took his hand. 6 weeks ago, I was scrubbing floors in a Boston tenement, watching my life waste away. Now I'm sitting in my own house with my husband, planning a future I actually want. So yes, Nathaniel, you made the right choice. We both did." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and when they finally pulled apart, Abigail felt something settle in her chest. This was home. Not the house or the ranch, but this. Being with someone who saw her worth, who chose her every day, who built a life alongside her instead of just letting her exist in the margins. They went to bed together, truly together, for the first time. No awkwardness, no hesitation. Just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate disasters and decided to build something better. Later, lying in the darkness with Nathaniel's arm around her, Abigail thought about the future. There would be more storms, more struggles, more moments when survival felt impossible. But there would also be mornings like this, waking up beside someone who mattered, in a place that felt like home, building a life worth fighting for. "Nathaniel?" she whispered. "Hmm? Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. For choosing me. For letting me be part of this." He pulled her closer. "I should be thanking you. You saved my life today. Literally. We saved each other." "Yeah," he said quietly. "I guess we did." Abigail closed her eyes and let herself drift towards sleep, thinking that 6 weeks ago she'd been nobody's first choice. Now she was exactly where she was meant to be, chosen, valued, home. Spring turned to summer, and the valley came alive with colors Abigail had never seen in Boston. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows. The pine trees deepened to rich green. The sky stretched endlessly blue, so vast it made her dizzy sometimes. The ranch thrived under their combined attention. Fences stood straight. The house gleamed with fresh paint. The cattle grew fat on good grazing. Abigail learned to rope, to ride properly, to shoot the rifle Nathaniel insisted she carry when she went far from the house. "You're getting good at this," Jack said one afternoon, watching her separate a calf from the herd without assistance. "Had a good teacher," Abigail said, nodding toward Nathaniel. "Nah, the boss can teach mechanics, but you can't teach instinct. You got that naturally." She'd never thought of herself as someone with ranching instinct, but maybe Jack was right. Maybe she'd just needed the space to discover what she was capable of. Life settled into a rhythm that felt permanent. Wake before dawn. Work until exhaustion. Fall into bed beside Nathaniel and do it all again the next day. It was brutal and beautiful and exactly what Abigail needed. But in late July, the rain stopped. At first it seemed like normal summer weather, but days turned into weeks with no moisture. The grass began to yellow. The creek that had nearly killed them during the spring flood shrank to a trickle. Nathaniel started watching the sky with increasing worry. "We need rain," he said one evening, staring at the cloudless horizon. "It'll come," Abigail said, trying to sound confident. "Maybe. Maybe not." He rubbed his face. "I've seen droughts out here. They can last months. Kill everything." "Has it happened before?" "Once. About 10 years ago. Lost half my herd, took 3 years to rebuild." Abigail heard the fear beneath his words. The ranch had barely recovered from last year's drought. Another one might finish them. August brought no relief. The heat became oppressive. The grass turned brown and brittle. The cattle grew thin, struggling to find enough grazing. Every day, Nathaniel rode out to check water sources, and every day he came back looking more worried. "We need to make a decision," he said one night at dinner. "If this keeps up, we'll have to sell cattle before they get too weak to make the trip to market. Sell them now, before fall, we'll get terrible prices. But if we wait and they die, we get nothing." Abigail saw the defeat in his eyes. This was the nightmare every rancher faced, losing everything to weather they couldn't control. "How many would we need to sell?" she asked. "Half the herd, at least. Maybe more. That's everything you've rebuilt since last year." "I know." He pushed food around his plate. "But keeping them alive through a drought, we can't afford either. Feed costs money we don't have." They sat in miserable silence. Finally, Abigail said, "What if we moved them? To better grazing?" "Where?" "Every ranch around here is dealing with the same problem." "What about higher elevation? The mountains must get more moisture." Nathaniel shook his head. "The good high country is already claimed. Other ranchers have been using it for years. There's no room for our herd." "Have you asked?" "Don't need to. I know what they'd say. Maybe things have changed. Maybe someone's willing to share now." "This is the frontier, Abigail. People don't share. They protect what's theirs." "Then we sell," Abigail said, though the words tasted bitter. "We do what we have to do to survive." 2 days later, they started the long drive to Cheyenne with half the herd. Jack and Charlie came to help, and even with 4 people, it was exhausting work. The cattle were weak and ornery. The heat was relentless. Dust choked everything. They reached Cheyenne on the 3rd day, filthy and exhausted. The stockyard was crowded with other ranchers making the same desperate choice. Abigail saw it in their faces, the resignation, the defeat. The buyers knew they had the advantage. They offered prices that were barely above theft. "That's insulting," Nathaniel said when the first buyer made an offer. "That's market value in a drought. the buyer said, shrugging. Take it or don't. Plenty of other desperate sellers today. Nathaniel negotiated for an hour but barely moved the price. Finally, defeated, he accepted. Abigail watched the cattle they'd worked so hard to keep alive get driven away for a fraction of what they were worth and felt rage burn in her chest. This isn't fair, she said. Fair doesn't exist out here, Nathaniel replied. Only survival. They stayed in town that night at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. Abigail sat in their room, doing math in her head. The money from the cattle sale would cover their immediate expenses, but wouldn't last the winter. And if the drought continued, they'd have to sell more. Eventually, there'd be nothing left. Nathaniel came in looking 20 years older. How bad is it? Abigail asked. Bad. We can make it through fall if we're careful, but winter... He sat heavily on the bed. I don't know, Abigail. I've survived a lot, but I don't know if we can survive this. Yes, we can. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because we survived the flood. Because we fixed everything the storm broke. Because we don't quit. She took his hand. We'll figure this out. You have too much faith in me. No, I have the right amount of faith in us. The next morning, they headed back to the ranch. The ride was quiet, both of them lost in worried thoughts. When they arrived, the house looked the same, clean, painted, cared for. But Abigail saw it differently now. All their work, all their progress, threatened by weather they couldn't control. That night, lying in bed, Nathaniel said, I'm sorry. For what? For bringing you into this mess. You could have stayed in Cheyenne, found safe work. Instead, you married me, and now you're trapped in a dying ranch. Abigail rolled over to face him. I'm not trapped. I chose this. I choose it every day. Even now, when everything's falling apart? Especially now. This is what partnership means, not just enjoying the good times, but fighting through the bad ones together. Nathaniel pulled her close. I don't deserve you. Stop saying that. We deserve each other. September brought no rain and new problems. Word spread through the valley that the Cross Ranch had sold cattle early. People started talking, speculating about how bad things must be for Nathaniel to make such a desperate move. Abigail first heard the whispers when she went to the general store for supplies. Two women stood by the fabric, voices low, but not low enough. Did you hear? Nathaniel Cross had to sell half his herd. I heard. And that woman he married, she's not even the one he was supposed to get. What do you mean? She's the replacement. The real bride ran off, so he took her older sister instead. Probably got desperate. How awful! Imagine being someone's second choice. Abigail stood frozen, holding a bag of flour, feeling the words hit like physical blows. Second choice. Replacement. Desperate. She paid for her supplies and left without speaking to anyone. On the ride home, she told herself the gossip didn't matter, that she and Nathaniel knew the truth, but the words echoed in her head anyway. Second choice. She didn't tell Nathaniel about the gossip. He had enough to worry about. But it sat in her chest like a stone, growing heavier. A week later, they made the trip back to Cheyenne to sell more cattle. The prices had dropped even further. Nathaniel negotiated until he was hoarse, but the buyers wouldn't budge. This is robbery, he said. This is business, the buyer replied. Drought's hitting everyone. If you don't like my price, try someone else. They did. Every buyer offered the same insulting rates. Finally, Nathaniel accepted the best offer they could get and watched another portion of his herd disappear for a fraction of their value. At the stockyard, Abigail overheard men talking. That's Cross, isn't it? From up valley? Yeah. Heard he's about done. Drought's killing him. Shame. He built that place from nothing. Now it's all falling apart. Happens. Some men aren't meant to last out here. Abigail wanted to scream at them, to defend Nathaniel, to tell them he'd survived 15 years of frontier hell. But what was the point? They'd already decided he was finished. On the ride back, Nathaniel was silent. Abigail tried to start conversation several times, but gave up when he barely responded. His shoulders were hunched, his face carved with defeat. That night he didn't come to bed. Abigail found him sitting on the porch in the dark, staring at nothing. Nathaniel? I'm losing it, he said quietly. The ranch. Everything I built. It's disappearing piece by piece, and I can't stop it. Abigail sat beside him. We'll figure something out. There's nothing to figure out. We're out of options, out of money, out of cattle. By spring, we'll be out of everything. Then we start over. With what? I'm 41 years old. I don't have another 15 years to rebuild. You have me, Abigail said fiercely. You have us. That's not nothing. Nathaniel looked at her and she saw tears on his face. You should leave before this destroys you too. What? Go to Cheyenne, find work. You're smart, capable. You'll survive. But if you stay here, you'll go down with me. I'm not leaving. Abigail, no, I married you. For better or worse. This is worse, and I'm staying. You're being stubborn. Yes, and you're being dramatic. We're not finished yet. We're close enough. Abigail grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. Listen to me. You built this ranch from nothing once. We can do it again if we have to. But we don't quit. We fight. That's what we do. I'm tired of fighting. I know, so let me fight for a while. You rest. I'll handle tomorrow. You can't. Watch me. The next day, Abigail rode into Cheyenne alone. She went straight to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. I need advice, she told the older woman. About what? Survival. We're losing the ranch. The drought's killing us. I need ideas. Mrs. Patterson studied her. What's Nathaniel say? He's giving up. I'm not. Stubborn girl. But there was approval in her voice. What kind of ideas you looking for? Anything, extra work, ways to make money, someone who might buy cattle at fair prices, anything that keeps us afloat until the rain comes back. Mrs. Patterson thought for a moment. There's a man named Harrison, runs a big operation north of here. He's always looking for good breeding stock. Might pay better prices than the stockyard. Why would he pay more? Because he's looking at long-term value, not just drought-panicked sellers. If your cattle are good quality, he'll recognize that. They are. Nathaniel spent 15 years building the herd. Then talk to Harrison. Can't hurt to try. Abigail found Harrison at his ranch, a sprawling operation that made Nathaniel's place look tiny. The man himself was in his 50s, weathered and sharp-eyed. I'm Abigail Cross, she said. My husband and I run a ranch 40 miles south. I heard you buy breeding stock. Sometimes. What are you selling? Quality cattle. Drought's forcing us to reduce our herd, but these animals are good, strong bloodlines, well cared for. Harrison studied her. Your husband know you're here? No. Why not? Because he's too proud to ask for help. And I'm not. Harrison almost smiled. Fair enough. Bring me 3 head. I'll evaluate them and make an offer. If they're as good as you say, we might do business. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I don't pay charity prices, but I do pay fair ones. Abigail rode home with the first hope she'd felt in weeks. She found Nathaniel in the barn, working with mechanical precision. I went to Cheyenne, she said. He looked up. Why? To find solutions. I found a buyer who might pay fair prices for good breeding stock. Abigail, we already sold to the stockyard. We still have cattle left. I'm talking about selling the best ones to someone who'll value them properly. Who? Man named Harrison. He wants to evaluate 3 head, make an offer. Nathaniel set down his tools. You went to Harrison without asking me? Yes. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. That's actually smart. Harrison's tough, but fair. If he's interested, we might get decent prices. I know. How'd you know about him? Mrs. Patterson told me. Nathaniel shook his head slowly. You're something else, you know that? Is that a complaint? No, it's gratitude. I was ready to give up, and you're out there finding solutions. That's what partners do. They selected the 3 best cattle and drove them to Harrison's ranch the next day. Harrison evaluated them with an expert eye, checking teeth, build, temperament. Finally, he nodded. Good stock, real good. Your husband knows his business. He does, Abigail said. I'll buy these 3 at double the stockyard rate. And if you have more this quality, I'll take them too. Nathaniel's face went slack with shock. Double? Quality costs money. You're not selling me desperate cattle. You're selling me breeding stock that'll improve my herd. That's worth paying for. They sold 6 more head over the next week at Harrison's fair prices. It wasn't enough to solve all their problems, but it bought them breathing room, bought them time. Thank you, Nathaniel said to Abigail that night. for not giving up when I did. You didn't give up, you were just tired. I was ready to quit. Well, I wasn't, and I'm not going to be. She took his hand. We're in this together. When you're weak, I'll be strong. When I'm weak, you'll be strong. That's how we survive. Nathaniel pulled her into his arms. I love you, he said, the words rough with emotion. It was the first time he'd said it clearly, without hesitation. Abigail felt tears prick her eyes. I love you too. October brought the first rain in 4 months. It wasn't much, just a brief shower that left the ground damp for a few hours, but it felt like a miracle. Nathaniel stood in the yard, face turned up to the sky, letting water run down his cheeks. It's coming back, he said. The rain's coming back. But the relief was short-lived. The drought had done its damage. Even with Harrison's fair prices, they'd sold most of the herd. The ranch felt empty, diminished, and the gossip in town got worse. Abigail heard it everywhere now. At the general store, outside the church, in every public space, people whispered about the failing ranch and the desperate replacement bride. One afternoon, standing in line at the post office, she heard 2 men talking behind her. Cross is done. Saw him sell his last decent cattle to Harrison. Shame. Used to be a good operation. Well, that's what happens when you get desperate enough to marry the wrong woman. What do you mean? She's not even the bride he ordered. She's the older sister. The real girl ran off, so he took what he could get. That's rough. Bet he regrets it now. Abigail turned around so fast both men jumped. I'm standing right here, she said. The taller man had the grace to look embarrassed. Ma'am, we didn't mean… Yes, you did. You meant every word. But you got one thing wrong. What's that? Nathaniel didn't settle for me. He chose me. After he met me. After he knew the truth. He chose me because I was honest and strong and willing to fight for that ranch. Her voice shook with anger. And unlike you cowards gossiping in post offices, I don't quit when things get hard. So take your pity and your gossip and shove it. She walked out, shaking with adrenaline and fury. The whole ride home, she replayed the conversation, wondering if she'd made things worse. When she told Nathaniel that evening, his face went dark. They said, what? It doesn't matter. Yes, it does. He stood abruptly. I'm going to town. Nathaniel, don't. It'll just create more problems. I don't care. They don't get to talk about you like that. Why? Because it's rude? Because it hurts my feelings? Abigail stood too. Or because part of it's true. What? I am the replacement. I did come instead of Margaret. Those are facts. Those facts don't tell the whole story. But they're still what people see. The woman who wasn't wanted. The second choice. You're not a second choice, Nathaniel said fiercely. You're the only choice that mattered. Then prove it. How? Stand with me. In public. Let everyone see that you chose me, that we're partners, that their gossip means nothing. Abigail's voice broke. Because right now it feels like I'm fighting this battle alone. Nathaniel crossed to her and cupped her face. You're not alone. You've never been alone. And tomorrow, the whole damn town is going to know it. The next day, Nathaniel insisted they go to Cheyenne together. They arrived on a Saturday when the town was busiest. Everyone was there, ranchers, merchants, families shopping for supplies. Nathaniel drove the wagon straight to the stockyard where a crowd had gathered for the weekly cattle auction. He helped Abigail down, then stood in front of everyone. I have something to say, he announced, loud enough to silence conversations. People turned to stare. Abigail felt her face flush, but Nathaniel kept his arm around her waist, solid and unwavering. Most of you know me, Nathaniel Cross. I've been ranching in this valley for 15 years. Built my operation from nothing, survived drought and flood and everything this frontier could throw at me. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some of you have been talking about my ranch failing, about how I had to sell cattle early, how the drought's destroying me. You're right. It's been brutal. But you're wrong about one thing. He pulled Abigail closer. You've been calling my wife the replacement bride, the second choice. The woman I settled for because the real bride ran off. His voice got harder. That's bullshit. Gasps from the crowd. Abigail wanted to disappear, but Nathaniel's grip was firm. Abigail came here and told me the truth, when she could have lied. She worked harder than any ranch hand I've ever employed. She saved my life during the spring flood. She found buyers when I'd given up. She's stronger, braver, and more valuable than anyone in this town. including me. The crowd had gone completely silent. So yes, she wasn't the woman I was expecting. Thank the stars for that, because the woman I got is better than anything I deserved. And if any of you have something to say about it, say it to my face, not behind her back in post offices and general stores. Nobody spoke. The silence stretched awkward and heavy. Finally, Harrison stepped forward. Well said, Cross. Your wife's got more backbone than half the men here. Anyone with eyes can see that. A few people murmured agreement. Not everyone. Some faces remained hostile or skeptical, but enough that the atmosphere shifted. Nathaniel looked at Abigail. Did I do okay? You did better than okay, she whispered. They spent the rest of the day in town, and if people were still gossiping, they did it quieter, more carefully. Abigail walked beside Nathaniel with her head high, feeling something settle in her chest. She wasn't a second choice anymore. She was the choice, the only one that mattered. That night, back at the ranch, Nathaniel built a fire in the yard. He disappeared into the house and returned carrying a wooden box. What's that? Abigail asked. Letters. He opened the box, revealing dozens of folded papers. Everything I wrote to Margaret, everything I thought I wanted. He tossed the first letter into the fire. It caught immediately, curling into ash. What are you doing? Getting rid of the past. The future I thought I wanted doesn't matter anymore. This is the future that matters. You and me. One by one, he burned the letters. Abigail watched the paper turn to smoke, carrying away the ghost of the woman Nathaniel had been expecting. The woman who would have been wrong for him, wrong for this place. When the last letter caught fire, Nathaniel sat beside Abigail. No more replacements, he said. No more second choices. Just us. Just us, Abigail agreed. They sat together under the vast Wyoming sky, watching smoke rise into starlight, and Abigail felt the last weight lift from her shoulders. She'd come here expecting to be unwanted. Instead, she'd found something she'd never had before, a place where she belonged, a person who chose her, a future worth fighting for. The drought would end eventually. The ranch would recover. But more than that, they'd recover. Together. Stronger than before. And that was worth more than any herd of cattle or any amount of rain. November came with the first real rainstorm since spring. Abigail woke to the sound of water drumming on the roof and sat up so fast she startled Nathaniel awake. What's wrong? He mumbled. Listen. They lay there in the darkness, listening to rain pour down like a blessing. Nathaniel's hand found hers under the blankets and squeezed tight. It's really here, he said. Finally. They got up before dawn and stood on the porch, watching water soak into earth that had been parched for months. The valley was gray and shrouded in mist, but to Abigail it looked beautiful. How long do you think it'll last? She asked. Could be days, could be weeks. Hard to tell with fall storms. Nathaniel put his arm around her. But it's a start. The rain continued for 3 days straight. The creek swelled back to normal levels. The grass, what was left of it, drank deep. The cattle lifted their heads and seemed to breathe easier. On the 4th day, the sun broke through and the valley sparkled like something new made. Nathaniel rode out to check the damage and came back looking cautiously optimistic. The south pastures recovered some. North Range, too. If we get more rain this winter, we might actually make it through spring. We will make it, Abigail said. We've come too far to fail now. But making it through meant surviving on almost nothing. Their herd was down to a quarter of what it had been. The money from Harrison's purchases would cover basics, but there was no margin for error. One bad expense, one unexpected problem, and they'd be finished. Abigail started looking for ways to stretch every penny. She planted a late fall garden, hoping to coax vegetables from the ground before the first hard freeze. She preserved everything she could: pickles, jams, dried meat. She mended clothes until they were more patch than original fabric. Nathaniel noticed, but didn't comment until one evening when he found her resoling his boots with leather scraps. You don't have to do that, he said. These boots cost money we don't have. I can fix them. Abigail, you're working yourself to death. So are you. That's different. The ranch is my responsibility. No, Abigail said firmly. It's our responsibility. We survive together, or we don't survive at all. He sat beside her and watched her work for a moment. When did you learn to cobble boots? I didn't, I'm figuring it out as I go. Story of our lives, isn't it? Abigail looked at him and saw the exhaustion in his face, the worry he carried every day. But beneath it, something else. A stubborn refusal to quit that matched her own. Yeah, she said. I guess it is. The first snow came in early December, light and brief. Jack and Charlie stopped by to help move the remaining cattle to winter pasture, and Abigail fed them a dinner that stretched their food stores thin, but was worth it to see the men's grateful faces. You two are going to make it, Charlie said, mopping up gravy with bread. I wasn't sure after the drought hit, but you're fighters. We're stubborn, Abigail corrected. Same thing out here. After they left, Nathaniel did the monthly accounts, and his face went grim. What? Abigail asked. We're short. Even with careful spending, we're going to run out of money by February. What do we need money for between now and spring? Feed, supplies, emergencies. If something breaks, if an animal gets sick, then we'll figure it out when it happens, Abigail interrupted. We can't solve problems that don't exist yet. That's not how planning works. No, but that's how survival works. We handle what's in front of us. Everything else is just worry. Nathaniel stared at her. How are you so calm? Because panic doesn't help, and because we've survived worse already. He pulled her into his arms, holding tight. I don't know what I'd do without you. Good thing you don't have to find out. 2 weeks before Christmas, Abigail woke feeling strange, nauseous, dizzy, her body wrong in ways she couldn't explain. She made it to the outhouse before being sick, then spent the rest of the morning trying to hide her symptoms from Nathaniel. But he noticed anyway. You feeling all right? He asked at breakfast. Fine, just tired. You look pale. I'm always pale. Not like this. He reached across the table and felt her forehead. You're not fevered, but something's wrong. I'm fine, Nathaniel. Stop worrying. But the symptoms continued. Nausea every morning, exhaustion that sleep didn't touch, a strange sensitivity to smells. Abigail told herself it was stress, overwork, the harsh winter taking its toll. Then her monthly courses didn't come. She sat in the bedroom counting back weeks, doing math that made her heart race. It wasn't possible. Except it was. She and Nathaniel had been sharing a bed for months now. Of course it was possible. She was pregnant. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Pregnant. In the middle of winter, with money running out, the ranch barely surviving. Pregnant when they could barely feed themselves, let alone a child. She should have been terrified. Instead, sitting there in the quiet bedroom, Abigail felt something unexpected unfold in her chest. Joy. Pure, illogical, impossible joy. She was carrying Nathaniel's child. They were going to be a family. She waited until evening to tell him, choosing her moment carefully. They were sitting by the fire after dinner, Nathaniel reading and Abigail pretending to mend. Finally, she set down her sewing. I need to tell you something. He looked up. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. At least, I don't think it is. She took a breath. I'm pregnant. Nathaniel went completely still. What? I'm pregnant. I'm sure. All the signs are there. He set down his book with shaking hands. When? I don't know exactly. A couple months, maybe? And you're sure? Yes. Nathaniel stood up, sat down, stood again. He ran both hands through his hair, his face cycling through emotions too fast to track. Say something, Abigail said. I don't know what to say. He stopped, looked at her with eyes that had gone suspiciously bright. We're having a baby? Yes. A baby. He crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair. We're having a baby. Abigail touched his face. You're repeating yourself. I know. I can't. I don't. His voice broke. I thought I'd never have this. A family, a child. I'd given up on it. Well, surprise. He laughed, the sound half-sob, and pulled her into his arms. They sat there on the floor, holding each other, while the magnitude of it sank in. We can't afford a baby, Nathaniel said finally. I know. We're barely surviving as it is. I know. The ranch might fail. We might lose everything. I know all of that. Abigail pulled back to look at him. Are you saying you don't want it? No, hell no. I want it more than anything. I'm terrified. So am I. But we're going to do it anyway. Nathaniel cupped her face. You're incredible, you know that? I'm practical. There's a difference. No, he said. There really isn't. The next day, Nathaniel rode to Cheyenne and came back with a book on childbirth and infant care. That night, they read it together by lamplight, learning about pregnancy stages and delivery and all the terrifying things that could go wrong. Maybe we shouldn't read this, Abigail said after a particularly graphic section about complications. We need to know what we're dealing with. I'm dealing with enough already. I don't need to imagine worst-case scenarios. Nathaniel closed the book. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm just scared. Me too. She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. But this baby is happening whether we're ready or not, so we might as well be happy about it. I am happy. Terrified, but happy. Good. Because I need you to be strong when I'm not. Always, he promised. Winter deepened. The money situation got worse. By January, they were down to their last dollars, stretching meals, burning less wood to save on heating costs. Abigail wore every piece of clothing she owned layered against the cold, and she was showing now. Not much, but enough that her dresses were getting tight. She let out the seams as far as they would go, but eventually she'd need new clothes they couldn't afford. One evening, Nathaniel found her crying over the accounts. What's wrong? Everything. We're out of money. The baby needs things, clothes, blankets, a cradle. I need a midwife for the delivery. We can't afford any of it. She wiped her eyes angrily. I should be happy. I am happy, but I'm also terrified we're bringing a child into disaster. Nathaniel pulled her close. We'll figure it out. How? I don't know yet, but we will. 2 days later, Harrison showed up at the ranch. Heard you're expecting, he said without preamble. Abigail, who'd been hauling water, nearly dropped the bucket. How did you... Small community? Word travels. He looked around the property. Place looks good considering what you've been through. We're managing, Nathaniel said carefully. I'm sure you are. That's why I'm here. Harrison pulled an envelope from his coat. I'd like to buy the rest of your breeding cattle. Same fair rates as before. Nathaniel shook his head. Can't. We need them to rebuild the herd come spring. I understand. That's why I'm offering to sell you back half the cattle I buy, plus 2 quality bulls, come April, at cost. Nathaniel stared. Why would you do that? Because I respect what you're building here, and because that wife of yours has more grit than most men I know. Harrison handed over the envelope. Think about it. Offer's good for a week. After he left, Nathaniel opened the envelope. The amount Harrison was offering would cover them through winter and spring, with money left over for baby supplies and a midwife. It's too good, Nathaniel said. There has to be a catch. Maybe some people are just decent, Abigail said. Or maybe he's buying goodwill for later. Does it matter? We need the money. He's offering fair terms. I know, Nathaniel rubbed his face. I hate feeling like charity. It's not charity, it's business. He gets quality cattle, we get money, and a chance to rebuild. Everyone benefits. They sold the cattle to Harrison the following week. The money felt like a lifeline thrown to drowning people. They could breathe again, plan again, hope again. Abigail used some of the money to buy fabric and spent her evenings sewing baby clothes. Her stitches weren't perfect, but each tiny garment represented love and hope. Nathaniel built a cradle from scrap wood, sanding it smooth, making it beautiful in its simplicity. I can't believe we're doing this, he said one night, watching Abigail fold miniature shirts. Doing what? Becoming parents, building a family, everything I thought I'd never have. You deserve it. So do you. You deserve more than this struggling ranch and a husband who barely knows how to show affection. Abigail set down her sewing. I don't want more than this. I want exactly this. You, this ranch, this baby. Struggles and all. Why? Because it's real. Because we built it ourselves from nothing. Because every hard day makes the good days better. She stood and crossed to him. I spent my whole life invisible, watching from the margins. Now I'm living, actually living. That's worth more than any amount of money or comfort. Nathaniel pulled her onto his lap carefully, mindful of her growing belly. I love you, he said. "I don't say it enough, but I do. I know, and I love you too." February brought more snow and a letter from Boston. Abigail stared at the envelope, recognizing her father's handwriting. She hadn't heard from him since leaving, hadn't even written to tell him about the marriage or the baby. She opened it with shaking hands. The letter was short. Her father was dying, liver failure from years of drinking. He wanted to see her one last time, wanted to apologize, wanted her forgiveness before the end. Abigail read it twice, feeling nothing. Then anger. Then a complicated grief for a relationship that had never been good and now never would be. "What is it?" Nathaniel asked, seeing her face. She handed him the letter. He read it, his expression darkening. "You don't have to go," he said. "I know. He doesn't deserve your forgiveness." "I know that too." Abigail took the letter back. "But if I don't go, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I should have. It's February, you're pregnant. The trip would be dangerous." "I know, but he's still my father." Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. "If you go, I'm going with you. We can't afford— I don't care. You're not making that trip alone in your condition." They left the next week, traveling by train this time instead of stagecoach. The journey was faster, but no less exhausting. Abigail spent most of it feeling sick, the motion and pregnancy combining into misery. Boston looked exactly the same and completely different. The tenement where she'd grown up seemed smaller, dirtier, more hopeless than she remembered. The smell of it, poverty and desperation, made her stomach turn. Her father was in a charity hospital, dying in a ward with 20 other forgotten men. Abigail barely recognized him. The man she remembered had been large, loud, overwhelming. This man was shrunken, yellow-skinned, barely conscious. "Abigail?" His voice was a whisper. "I'm here." "You came. I didn't deserve." "No, you didn't." She sat in the chair beside his bed. "But I came anyway." He tried to speak, coughed instead. When he recovered, tears ran down his face. "I'm sorry. For everything. For being useless. For gambling. For putting that burden on Margaret. On you." "Where's Margaret?" "Don't know. Haven't heard from her since she left." He coughed again. "Probably better off without me." "Probably." Her father's eyes found her face. "You look different. Stronger." "I am stronger." "You married? That rancher?" "Yes." "He treat you good?" "Better than I deserve, better than you ever did." Her father flinched but nodded. "Good, that's good." He closed his eyes. "I wasted my life, Abigail. Wasted everything. I'm glad you didn't waste yours. I almost did. I spent 26 years trying to fix your mistakes." "I know, I'm sorry." They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Abigail said, "I forgive you." "You do?" "Not because you earned it. Because carrying anger around is too heavy, and I'm tired." She stood. "I have a good life now. A husband who loves me. A ranch that's ours. A baby coming. I'm not letting your failures poison that." "A baby?" Her father's face crumpled. "I'll never meet my grandchild." "No, you won't." Will you tell them about me?" Abigail thought about that. "I'll tell them the truth. That you were complicated. That you made mistakes. That you loved us in your way, but it wasn't enough. And that I survived you." Her father died 2 days later. Abigail stood at his graveside in a cold February rain, feeling nothing and everything at once. Nathaniel held her hand while they buried a man who'd never quite figured out how to be a father. "You all right?" Nathaniel asked on the train ride home. "I don't know. I'm sad, but not because I'll miss him. I'm sad for what could have been if he'd been different." "You're allowed to grieve complicated things." "I know, I'm ready to go home now." "To Wyoming?" "Yes, to our home." They arrived back at the ranch in early March to find Jack and Charlie had kept things running smoothly. The cattle were healthy, the house intact, everything exactly as they'd left it. "Feels good to be back," Abigail said, standing in the kitchen that she'd scrubbed and organized and made her own. "Better than Boston?" Boston was never home. This is. Spring came late but dramatic. The valley exploded with wildflowers. The creek ran full and clear, the grass grew thick and green, and true to his word, Harrison delivered cattle, healthy animals that would form the foundation of their rebuilt herd. "We're going to make it," Nathaniel said, watching the cattle graze. "We already made it. This is just the next chapter." Abigail's pregnancy progressed. She grew larger, slower, more uncomfortable. Nathaniel treated her like she was made of glass, which drove her crazy until she was too tired to argue. In late April, he rode to Cheyenne and came back with a midwife named Mrs. Chen, no relation to their old Boston neighbor, but equally practical and unimpressed by frontier hardship. "You'll do fine," she said after examining Abigail. "You're built sturdy, and you're stubborn. That matters more than anything." "How long?" Abigail asked. "Couple weeks. Maybe sooner if the baby's impatient." The baby was impatient. Abigail's water broke on a sunny May morning while she was feeding chickens. The contractions started an hour later, hard and fast. Nathaniel went pale, sent Charlie racing for Mrs. Chen, and paced the house like a caged animal. "You're not helping," Abigail said between contractions. "What should I do?" "Stop looking like you're going to faint." "I might actually faint." "Then go outside. Let Mrs. Chen handle this." But when the pain got bad, really bad, worse than anything Abigail had imagined, she grabbed Nathaniel's hand and wouldn't let go. "I can't do this," she gasped. "Yes, you can. You're the strongest person I know." "I'm not strong. I'm terrified." "Then be terrified and do it anyway, like you always do." The labor lasted 8 hours. 8 hours of pain that rewrote Abigail's understanding of suffering. But finally, Mrs. Chen said, "One more push." Abigail pushed with everything she had left, and suddenly there was crying. Not her crying, baby crying. "It's a girl," Mrs. Chen announced, holding up a tiny, furious, perfect creature. Abigail started crying then, exhausted tears mixing with joy. Nathaniel was crying too, staring at his daughter like she was made of light. Mrs. Chen cleaned the baby and placed her in Abigail's arms. "She's healthy, good lungs, good color. You did well." Abigail looked down at the baby, her daughter, and felt the last pieces of her old life fall away. She wasn't the invisible sister anymore. She wasn't the second choice or the replacement. She was a mother, a wife, a woman who'd survived the frontier and built something real. "Hello," she whispered to the baby. "We've been waiting for you." Nathaniel touched his daughter's tiny hand with one finger. "She's perfect." "She's ours," Abigail said. They named her Sarah, after the foreman's wife who'd left, but whose kindness Nathaniel still remembered. Sarah Cross, born in a ranch house 40 miles from nowhere, into a life that would be hard but would also be filled with love. The weeks after Sarah's birth blurred together. Sleepless nights, endless feedings, the overwhelming responsibility of keeping a tiny human alive. But there were perfect moments too. Sarah's first smile, the way she gripped Nathaniel's finger, the peaceful weight of her sleeping against Abigail's chest. One evening, with Sarah asleep in her cradle and the summer sun setting over the valley, Nathaniel pulled something from his pocket. "I found these today," he said, holding out 2 charred fragments of paper. "Last pieces of those letters I burned, the ones to Margaret." Abigail took them, barely able to make out the words. "Why'd you keep them?" "I didn't mean to. They were stuck under the fire pit." He took them back. "I was going to throw them away, but then I realized I'm glad they exist." "Why?" "Because they brought you here. Margaret read those letters and ran. You read them and came anyway. If I'd never written them, we never would have met." "You think we were meant to meet?" "I don't know about meant, but I know I'm grateful we did." He tossed the paper fragments into the fire. "Last pieces of the past. Now it's just future." Abigail leaned against him, watching the fragments burn. "What kind of future do you think we'll have? Honest one? Hard one? Real one?" He kissed the top of her head. "With you and Sarah, that's enough." Summer deepened. The ranch thrived. The herd grew. Harrison bought more cattle at fair prices, and other ranchers started following his lead. Slowly, the Cross Ranch's reputation shifted from failing operation to those stubborn people who refused to quit. In town, the gossip changed too. People stopped calling Abigail the replacement bride and started calling her by her name. Mrs. Cross, the woman who'd saved her husband's ranch, the mother who carried her baby while working cattle. One afternoon in Cheyenne, The woman who'd gossiped about her in the post office approached Abigail carefully. "Mrs. Cross, I owe you an apology." Abigail, holding Sarah in the general store, looked at her coolly. "Do you?" "Yes. I said cruel things about you, about your marriage. I was wrong." "Yes, you were." The woman flushed. "I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. What you and your husband have built is impressive, admirable." "Thank you." Abigail adjusted Sarah. "But I don't need your approval. I never did." She walked away feeling lighter. Not because the woman had apologized, but because Abigail genuinely didn't care anymore. Other people's opinions had no power over her. She knew who she was now. That was enough. As fall approached, Abigail found herself reflecting on everything that had changed. A year ago, she'd been scrubbing floors in Boston, invisible and hopeless. Now she stood on a porch in Wyoming, watching her husband work cattle while their daughter dozed against her shoulder. It wasn't the life she had imagined, it was better. Because it was real, earned, chosen. One evening, Nathaniel came in from the range looking thoughtful. "What?" Abigail asked. "I was thinking about that first day, when you showed up in Cheyenne and told me the truth." "What about it?" "I almost sent you away. Almost told you to find work in town and never come back." "Why didn't you?" "Something about the way you looked at me. Like you were expecting the worst but hoping for better. I couldn't—" He stopped. "I couldn't add to your disappointments. I'm glad you didn't." "Me too." He crossed to her. "You changed everything, Abigail. The ranch, my life, me. I was half dead before you arrived. Just going through motions. Now I'm alive again." "We're alive together," Abigail corrected. That's what makes it work." That night, after Sarah was asleep and the house was quiet, Abigail stood at the bedroom window looking at the valley. The same valley she'd first seen from the stagecoach, terrified and desperate. Now it was hers. Home. Future. Nathaniel came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I spent 26 years being the wrong woman. Wrong sister, wrong daughter, wrong choice. And then I came here and found out I wasn't wrong at all. I was just in the wrong place." "You're in the right place now." "Yes." She turned in his arms. "We both are." They stood there together, two people who'd been broken and lost and desperate, who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful. Not perfect. Nothing about their life was perfect, but it was real and honest and theirs. The frontier had tested them, nearly destroyed them. But in the end, it had given them exactly what they needed: space to be themselves, purpose to fight for, and each other. That was worth more than any amount of comfort or ease. It was worth everything. Winter came again, but this time they were ready. The house was stocked, the cattle secured, money in the bank from successful sales. Sarah grew bigger, stronger, more aware. She'd be walking by spring, Nathaniel said, already trying to pull herself up. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling outside and a fire crackling inside, Abigail held her daughter while Nathaniel read aloud from a book of frontier stories. Sarah didn't understand the words, but she watched her father's face with serious attention. "She's going to be stubborn like you," Nathaniel said. "Good. She'll need that out here. And brave like both of us." "Better than brave," Abigail said. "Honest. I want her to grow up knowing she can be herself without apology." "She will. We'll make sure of it." Later, after Sarah was asleep, Abigail and Nathaniel sat together on the sofa, exhausted and content. "You know what I realized today?" Abigail said. "What?" "A year ago, I thought my life was ending. Turns out it was just beginning." "Because of the ranch?" "Because of everything. The ranch, you, Sarah, this life we're building. I was so focused on what I'd lost that I couldn't see what I might gain." "What did you gain?" "Everything that matters. Love, purpose, a future, myself." Nathaniel pulled her closer. "I gained all that too, because you were brave enough to tell the truth instead of running away from it. Margaret ran. And you didn't. That makes all the difference." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the wind outside and Sarah's soft breathing from the cradle. The ranch creaked around them, settling into winter. Their ranch. Their home. Abigail thought about everything that had brought her here: her father's failures, Margaret's betrayal, her her own desperation. All of it had seemed like disaster at the time. Now she understood it differently. Those weren't endings. They were necessary transitions, painful steps that led her exactly where she needed to be. Sometimes the wrong turn was actually the right path. Sometimes second choice was really first choice in disguise. Sometimes the life you thought you wanted wasn't nearly as good as the life you built from pieces nobody else wanted. The frontier had taught her that. Nathaniel had taught her that. This ranch, with its brutal honesty and endless challenges, had taught her that. And now she'd spend the rest of her life teaching it to Sarah. Teaching her that strength came from honesty, that love was built through struggle, that home wasn't a place you found. It was something you created with your own hands, your own courage, your own refusal to quit. Outside, the snow fell steadily, blanketing the valley in white. Inside, Sarah slept peacefully while her parents held each other close. The house they'd repaired together, the ranch they'd saved together, the family they'd built from nothing but hope and stubbornness. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. And under the vast Wyoming sky, in a ranch house 40 miles from anywhere, two people who'd been nobody's first choice chose each other again, every single day for the rest of their lives. That was the real story, not the perfect romance or the easy victory, but the honest one, the hard-won one, the one that mattered. And it was more beautiful than anything either of them could have imagined.